So that's the start of recording. So yeah, just again, if anyone just joined us, thank you so much for attending today's webinar with the launch of the Ceres Reimagine competition. It is in its third year, and you'll hear more about the actual competition and the sport and the whole process from Ceres directly, and we're here to support you throughout. And at the end of this webinar, we'll be able to answer any questions or queries. So really thank you very much for giving up your time and interest in this competition, and I'll hand straight over to Will.
Great, thanks James, and thanks everyone else for joining us today. We're really excited to be launching our third edition of Reimagine, and without further ado, we'll get started. So I'm going to start by introducing the people who are going to be talking today. So there's myself. I'm Will Ingram. I'm an engineer at Ceres, and I've been a STEM ambassador for 7 years. And 3 years ago, myself and Elizabeth, my colleague, who's on the line as well, started this competition. So just going to pass over to Elizabeth as well to give herself an introduction.
Yeah, hello everybody. Really delighted to be here. As Will said, we've been working on this competition for a couple of years now, and I'm delighted to say we've also had a huge amount of support from across the business and our colleagues. So there's lots of sort of STEM ambassadors that are registered through STEM Learning, obviously, and have really enabled the competition to succeed. I'm also one of those STEM ambassadors. I actually look after corporate comms for Ceres, but I have a degree in engineering. So yeah, it's been a lot of effort from lots of colleagues. But more importantly, it has been a lot of effort from the teachers that have really supported us with the first 2 years of the competition. And we're going to be hearing from one of them a little bit later on. And the pupils who have been absolutely amazing. So we're excited to see what this year holds for us. And delighted that you could make this kickoff session to understand a little bit more about it and hopefully get involved. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Elizabeth. So what you can see on screen is last year's competition winner. We have their teacher online with us today, who's going to talk a bit later about some of his experience that he can share with you. So welcome, Thomas, as well. So the agenda for today, we've got 30 minutes scheduled in, so there's a bit to pack in. So we're going to start by telling you a bit about who we are and what is Ceres, our company, and why Reimagine. Then Elizabeth's going to talk about some of the mechanics of the competition, so what we're asking the students to do and the timings associated, and also what we're looking for when we go around and do the judging. And then we're going to have Thomas to talk about his experience, some lessons learned from last year, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. So Ceres. So as I mentioned, I've worked for Ceres for 7 years now. It's been a great journey for me. I've been a STEM ambassador for all of that time as well, but I can say that on my STEM ambassador journey, Reimagine has certainly been the highlight of that. We started it. This will be our 3rd year, and it's been really great experience. And I think the reason this is because it links the STEM side, which I'm passionate about, with clean energy, which is my other passion. So I see STEM as trying to answer for young people the question of what is your purpose going to be in your career? And for me, clean energy was the answer to that. So uniting these two together is perfect for me. So as you can see on the slide, the company Elizabeth and I work for, Ceres, our purpose, as we see it, is to help sustain a clean, green planet by ensuring there is clean energy everywhere in the world. And we've got some great partners who are on board to help us deliver that. Why is this important? So I don't know if you guys have heard in the media about the 1.5 degrees C target. So this graph that you can see here is we've got time on the bottom axis, on the x-axis, and we've got CO2 emissions on the y-axis. And what this is trying to present is why decarbonisation is important. So decarbonisation essentially means stopping emissions of CO2 into the atmosphere. And CO2 emissions are important because they're causing global warming. That is an undisputed fact. And what this graph is showing is if we continue along the blue line, so you can see where it dissects around 2023, which is the year we're in now. This blue line, which is the reference case, so the baseline, if we continue on our current trajectory, will not stop cooling beyond 1.5 degrees C. In fact, we will meet that at 2030, so in 7 years' time. What we need to do is decarbonize, and the dashed line going down towards the line that says 1.5 degree pathway, that's where we need to get to in order to avoid some catastrophic impacts of climate change. So what do we do at Ceres for the decarbonisation mission? So our founder was a guy called Professor Brian Steele, and he was actually involved in the research group that invented the lithium-ion battery. So the lithium-ion battery goes into EVs, and it's clear that EVs, taking fossil fuel cars off the road, is part of the puzzle of how we decarbonize. So that's this chunk over here. But batteries and electrification of other areas is only a small chunk of this pie chart. So Professor Brian Steele also worked on something called a fuel cell. So this is the core technology that Ceres works on. So a fuel cell is a lot like a battery, but rather than being self-contained and being a energy storage device, it takes fuel in. So green fuel like hydrogen or ammonia or biofuels, it can take that in, and it's currently the most efficient method known to humankind to convert that chemical energy into electrical and to give us power for everything we need electricity for. Brilliant thing about the technology is you can also run it backwards. So this box here, Ceres Hydrogen, if you put water into and renewable energy into a fuel cell, into our fuel cell, and run it in electrolysis mode, you generate green hydrogen. And green hydrogen is the key element that will decarbonize sectors which batteries can't decarbonize. So you can see some examples that we put in this slide. We've got green steel production, future fuels. So for example, making aviation fuel. Currently, battery technologies are not suitable for aviation. Gas blending. Also, another example could be green fertilizer production. So I've thrown a lot of information about you about what Ceres is. I wonder if at this stage you have any questions. So if not, I can plow on to the next stage, which is you've heard about Ceres. This is who we are. This is our mission. But why have we started on Reimagine Competition, and what's Reimagine Competition all about? So at this stage, I'm going to hand you over to Elizabeth, who's going to talk you through some of that.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, look, I think we've been working on this technology for a very long time, and I think the time is now for us to really accelerate the business, we've seen not only greater understanding of the need for decarbonisation, we've seen governments respond to that through ambitious policy and funding being put in place. And I think, you know, increasingly the man on the street is understanding that we need to address climate warming. Clearly, the summer has yet again seen record world temperatures and so on and so forth. So we're really passionate about this, but we also understand that as well it's accelerating our own technology as kind of a UK high growth technology business. We have an obligation to excite the next generation about what a career in this industry might entail and actually inspire them to be part of the solution. So Reimagine was a competition that was created from a gem of an idea from our chief technology officer, who said, let's really work on a way that we can inspire the next generation to get involved in the mission to address climate challenge and to be part of the solution to achieving net zero. So it's pretty simple. We have the brief, which is schools can submit up to 2 entries. We recommend that you have a team of no more than 5 people for each entry. And the ask is that you create a 3-minute animation about a scientific concept that could be relevant to the net zero mission. And through that brief, we have seen just brilliant collaboration between the STEM subjects, those who excel in science and technology, and the arts, and people to bringing to bear their skills in telling a great story and explaining why their concept is relevant. And so that's the ask, that's the brief. Right. We try not to be too prescriptive. Obviously, Will's given you a little bit of an overview in terms of what Ceres does, but it's a huge topic, and overwhelmingly our advice would be to try and keep it simple, try and keep it to something tangible that sits around you. And so, you know, some ideas might be what happens when the wind stops blowing and the sun goes down. Obviously, we've seen an increase intention to electrify in the UK. There's a lot of discussion around moving from gas boilers to heat pumps. We've seen a lot of the installation of offshore wind and so on and so forth. How can hydrogen help to decarbonize parts of the energy system other technologies cannot reach, as Will had touched on before? Really just impressing upon the students that pretty much absolutely everything that we touch around us today relies on fossil fuels somewhere in that production process. So we're not asking students to think too big picture, too macro. Clearly, these things can be very hard to quantify or will be quite intangible. Think about something that you can touch and feel in your lives. And then this idea of future fuels, you know, we're very cognizant as well that we're going to need all the top technologies that we have today to reduce emissions, but we're also going to need ideas that we have not yet imagined, and hence the kind of concept of Reimagine. What other ideas can you have? And, you know, I know myself, I worked in the oil and gas industry for 10 years. You get to a certain age and you believe that things have always been done a certain way and will be done a certain way. And clearly, you know, the students of today will be the great minds of tomorrow that can really start to think beyond what is incumbent and challenge that and really come up with some better and brighter ideas for the future. So that is very much our intention with this competition. And sorry, I'm catching up with Will's slide. So in terms of timing, we're asking in the next months for submissions of interest from schools for inclusion in the events. And that allows us to allocate a STEM ambassador to your school who will be hands-on support, you know, to answer technical questions, potentially do site visits if that works for you. I'm glad to see that Frankie and Meryl, our colleagues, are also on the line today, and they are going to be your sort of first point of contact for ensuring that you have all that preparation and support in that early phase. So if you can give us some indication of interest, then we will take you forward and allocate an ambassador. And we very much hope there'll be a number of other webinars that will support students with resources on the animation side. There's lots of resources on our website that hopefully give useful tips and tricks. You know, our STEM ambassadors, I mean, last year it blew me away. They have gone above and beyond to really look for other resources to support the students as they formulate their ideas and take that forward. So if you need something, shout, and we will do our very, very best to help. The deadline for this year's competition submissions is the 29th of March. That's basically, you know, end of the spring term. We will go into a bit of an Easter break. And then the finalists will be announced following our judging roundtable. So there's a kind of closed judging roundtable that happens. We've got a brilliant lineup of judges again for this third edition of the competition. And then the photo that Will showed earlier in the presentation was of our awards ceremony, and that will be hosted again in June next summer. And we will be inviting the 3 final teams to join us for that event. It ties in with a brilliant industry event called Hydrogen for Life, and it allows the students not only to see the other competition winners, the animations. It gives them a chance to present their ideas to a judging panel. We've got some brilliant prizes, but even beyond that, we also have a whole host of brilliant technology companies that are working around the clean energy sector, and gives them an opportunity to go and talk to some of the companies that are really pioneering in this area of the clean energy revolution. In terms of what we are looking for, we have 3 categories. So we have best animation, best scientific research, and best overall winner that brings those 2 things together in the most compelling way. And the kind of judging criteria that we give to the team is the idea original? Does it really bring to life on screen some visual content and creativity? And we must really stress in this that we're obviously looking for sort of original content for the competition, you know, for us to share content and make that available and promote how well the teams have done. We can't do that if content has been taken or used from other sources unless it's really well sourced. Obviously, kind of just be mindful of things like soundtracks and things over the top of video. We're really looking for original content, not kind of the most slick looking content, I would say. Depth of scientific research. You know, our judges, despite their brilliance across engineering and science, every year we've been really surprised by a few great ideas. So you know, compelling ideas that you have researched really well definitely stand out. And then the Einstein factor, like, actually, have you taken something that's quite complex and explained it really well? Just impact. Is it inspiring? If we shared it on a big screen at Hydrogen for Life, are people going to go, wow, that's really original, and made me act upon what I've seen? So those are the aspects that the judges are looking for. And yeah, I think our overriding, I would say, advice would be to think of something if you can touch and feel, keep it fairly simple, and really utilize the experience and the support of the STEM ambassador to kind of help you know, delve into that scientific understanding a little bit better.
Hey, thanks, Elizabeth. just to pick up on one last point that came to mind, it really is quite, I see it as quite a unique opportunity for some of these students to talk about their ideas for potentially world-changing technologies in front of the industry, the people who are working on those challenges. So I see that as a pretty unique sell point of the competition. So next, Thomas, are you online?
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, great. Yeah,
Wonderful.
so I'll just hand over to you. If you tell me when to move on the slides.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so just to reiterate, I'm Thomas. I was the teacher organising the students for Colchester County High School for girls, the winners from last year. I wanted to talk about what really went well with the girls. I kind of pushed it out to the students as if you're interested in environmentalism at all, then come along and see what it's all about. And it drew in an enormous amount of support from all areas of the student population. Like I had artists and geographers and physicists all coming along, all because they were interested in the environment and in climate change and in what they could do to help. So much so that we ended up having 2 teams, and that was with me having to turn away about half of the students that were interested. And the students were enormously motivated, and the team that went on to the final more or less organised themselves the entire way. I think it brought out a new side to them that I'd never seen before, where they could almost devote themselves entirely to something which they thought was very important and was completely unrelated to their schoolwork in many ways. In terms of the challenges they faced, we were quite fortunate in that we had some year 12 students who could kind of keep the younger students in line a little bit more. The organisation was a major problem for them, and they had to do several rewrites of scripts and so on. But they got there, and they were really proud of what they came out with. And a few of them didn't really come into this with any kind of expectations or aspirations, and came away knowing how to animate and having experienced the Hydrogen for Life event, which I thought was really interesting. I think there was a VR headset, which some people absolutely loved last year. But could I have the next slide, please?
Sure, there's a slight delay. There you go.
So in terms of helping to manage them, it helped to have roles for the students. They started out by saying that, well, I'll be the leader and I will help organise you all. And they decided who would want to be the animators and who would want to create the actual drawings, who would want to write the script and so on. And so that helped lay out who was doing what at the very beginning stages. I think it was Chloe ended up making a Gantt chart for this, which was far and away over the top. But they really did try and stick to it. I think because Chloe had done an EPQ, she was in that frame of mind where she was very much, I want to plan and micromanage every single facet of this, and it really did help the team. But what impressed me most was, you can see in the middle there, on the right-hand side holding a sign up, Eleanor came into this with very little kind of animating experience. She'd done a bit in the past before, but she'd decided she wanted to take on that challenge, that she wanted to learn more about animation. And so she decided she'd do it all herself. And after about a week of doing that, decided that that was too much work and got the others to help with it. So I think their ability to share their work between each other really helped them come together. They told me, they didn't tell me this at the time, I only found out about this on the way back from the finalist event, was they all had a group chat where they were constantly chatting to each other. I mean, these weren't students that were friends beforehand, they just turned up to a meeting about climate change. And even now, they still message each other and talk about this event. So if I could have the next slide, please, as well. Thank you. I think what really brought this together for them was having a mix of interests. Because none of them were friends beforehand, it did make it a little bit difficult for them to get going. But because they all had an area of expertise, something they wanted to do, it helped them come together as a team. And I very much tried to let them take on the leading role. I didn't want to kind of step in and try and introduce my ideas into this. So I very much let them take over. But I found that if I let them have too loose of a rein, then what would end up happening was I would find out absolutely nothing for months, and I can't cope with that. So I ended up trying to meet with them every week to get them going a bit. The engineer, my engineer last year was Michael. I don't know if he's doing it this year or not, but he was really useful. We had a meeting quite early on with him, and he pretty much, we had some ideas, and Michael turned around and said, yeah, that's good, but it's not a big thing. And it was very clear to us that we needed to start over and come up with some new ideas. And the advice that Michael gave us regarding the animation and regarding how we could come up with some better ideas was really useful. And I think if we hadn't checked in the first few weeks with him, we would have gone down a completely different path for our entire animation. So don't be afraid to check in with him. I think I was emailing him quite regularly towards the end of the competition just for confirmation about things. And my final bit of advice was that if you're on the fence about it, give it a go, because the students absolutely love it. I've run science club at my school for a few years now, and I've never had the amount of interest that I got about this competition. And I think just a lot of them are quite worried about climate change, and this gives them the opportunity to speak their mind about it and feel like they're doing their bit. So if you are on the fence, definitely give it a go. The students will love it, and I definitely think it's worth it.
Thanks, Thomas. That was really good to hear. Thanks for joining us today.
No, it's my pleasure.
I just picked up. It's great to see that the winners of the competition were an all-girls group as well. So it's one of the objectives of Reimagine when we were starting out was we were definitely cognizant of the diversity gap in engineering as a sector, and we've taken certain steps to try and encourage diversity through this competition. So, for example, it's not a it was a deliberate choice to have the logo as a female. We've got some amazing female judges who are really inspiring role models, who the winning schools, the finalists, get to meet and potentially get to see themselves in these inspirational women. So yeah, brilliant to see that the winners this year was a girls team. I'm hoping we'll see some of them considering careers in STEM in the future. That'd be brilliant.
Great.
So now it's really time for us to just open the floor to questions. I'm not rushing off anywhere. I'm conscious it's 1 minute to our deadline, but if anyone's got any questions they'd like to ask, we're more than happy to answer them.
And equally,